All right, folks, let's do it. We are live and ready to rock and roll. Was that a Marco Rubio moment because they caught me drinking the water? Welcome to the show. This is Common Threads. We are doing this live every Thursday, live from beautiful Brooklyn, New York, streaming on Twitch. We're on YouTube. We're on Rumble. We're on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. We're in your hearts and minds. Taylor, am I forgetting any platforms, or did I get them all?
You're good.
And we're good to go. Now, what is all of this about? What are we doing here? For those of you who don't know me, to the millions of viewers streaming this at home, wondering who this guy is, my name is JD Durkin. I'm the host of this show, and I am very grateful to say that that is the position I'm in. My real name is John. That's what my mom calls me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a journalist here in New York City. I broadcast from the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange, but before that, for about 5 years, I was a White House reporter and a Capitol Hill correspondent. My day-to-day job involved interviewing members of Congress, political figures of note, heads of state at press conferences, cabinet officials, and world leaders. Some of the greatest events I've had the opportunity to cover over the course of my career, just so you don't think I'm some random jabroni from New Jersey, attending the Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki, Finland. Remember that? That was true. I was there. The 75th anniversary of Normandy on the north shores of France, and not one, but two presidential impeachments that I covered as a Capitol Hill reporter. But without a doubt, the most important work that I did over the course of my career in journalism is pretty tantamount to what we're doing here tonight and in the future for Common Threads. It was traveling the country. It was speaking with voters in real communities, places like Mankato, Minnesota, Colfax, Iowa, and my favorite small town in the U.S., this is true, Belen, New Mexico. If you've never been to New Mexico, don't sleep on the land of enchantment. Whenever I traveled this great country, I talked with voters in that silent, moderate majority. I heard for years and years about the frustration of the state, not just of our body politic, but of our political discourse. And that brings us to tonight. We are 47 days away from this presidential election. A lot of people want you to think, understandably so, that it is the most important presidential election we've ever had. So we are doing something new here on the show. Myself, Taylor, Dan, Chris, Alexi, Danielle. We are live from Brooklyn every week on all of the platforms where people are actually consuming information. And that's why we're bringing you the concept here. It's a show we hope is really unlike any other, one that involves you, the viewers at home. Yes, you choose the final debate topic here on Common Threads every week. We'll also feature your comments, as long as they're appropriate, up on the screen. And you are the most important part, because out of all of this in the busy political media world, it is you the viewer, you the reader, you the voter, who is always more important. When I was on Capitol Hill as a reporter for years, I learned that the truth, air quotes, the truth is usually an inconvenient, messy version of the middle. The true spirit of our political debate does not lie with the loudest voices, either Democrats or Republicans. Compromise should not be a dirty word. And that's what brings us here to Common Thread. So tonight and every week into the future here, moving forward, a little bit something different for all of you watching at home. And so far, I have to say without a doubt, guys, I think this is the greatest show we have ever done. What makes our show different? Right there on the bottom right is a QR code. You can weigh in now with what you want to see the third debated topic be on the show tonight. Between our two expert guests, we'll introduce them there in a second. Do you want to hear a Republican and a Democrat go head-to-head on the looming China threat, and which campaign is better situated to handle that threat, or dealing with the border? Two very important issues for the campaigns, and certainly important to the heart and minds of viewers all throughout the country. Time now to welcome in our top-tier guests. They've been waiting, and here we go. Chris Neiweem is a Republican. He's a political advisor. He's a GOP lobbyist, a publicist, a writer, also an Iraq war veteran. Chris, thank you for your service. You can follow Chris at Chris Neiweem on Twitter. And here on the other side, Antjuan Seawright is the CEO of Blueprint Strategy, LLC, a Democratic strategist, a longtime prominent Democratic media figure. He is at Antjuan CSEA on Twitter. Antjuan and Chris, my special thanks to both of you guys for getting us kicked off, our first episode of Common Threads. Thank you, fellas.
It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So let's take a look at our first topic of the week, our first debate topic of the show. Remarkably, it is not just one, but two assassination attempts on the life of former President Donald Trump in West Palm Beach in Florida on Sunday near his golf club. A would-be assassin waited out for 12 hours, quote, lying in wait for the former president before a Secret Service agent opened fire, thwarting the potential attack. Here's a look at what Vice President Kamala Harris had to say in a statement from the campaign, which I believe we have. Harris saying, I am thankful that former President Trump is safe. I commend the Secret Service and law enforcement partners for their vigilance. As President Biden said, our administration will ensure the Secret Service has every resource, capability, and protective measure necessary to carry out its critical mission. Obviously, very important there for the Harris campaign to make that type of statement. We've heard similar sentiments from similar Democrats as well. And then this one may be catching a little bit of people by surprise. Here's Donald Trump himself, the man himself, speaking with his former press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, about a, quote, very nice phone call that he had with the incumbent Democratic president. Take a listen. We'll talk about it on the other side.
President Biden called me yesterday. It was very nice. We had a very nice conversation. I appreciated that he called about, what happened the other day. And he says, he's committed. It's committed. No, and today, a little while ago, I got a very nice call from Kamala. No, I didn't know. It was very nice.
Well, first of all, aside from the obvious, he still cannot pronounce Kamala Harris's name correctly. I'm really surprised, Antjuan. I'm going to kick this off with you. First of all, what do you make of the remarks there from President Donald Trump showing a bit of graciousness to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and then also the reaction from a lot of Trump loyalists there inside the room?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And Chris, thank you for your service to this country. Thanks for having the steel spine to put on that uniform to protect our freedoms. I thank you for that. But look, we condone political violence in any way, shape, or form. We condone that. It's not accepted and should never be welcome in the United States of America. That's part of the beauty about this country. But I would also say is that we are here because leaders have had extreme rhetoric to bring us to this point. I'm thankful that the president embraced the phone call from President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, not Kamala. But what I'm disappointed in is the president then quickly tried to turn blame to Democrats for whatever individual citizens decided to do. It's not the Democrats, it's not been the Democrats that are tweeting, I hate Taylor Swift. It's not Democrats who are using divisive language after the Paul Pelosi incident. Not Democrats praising January 6th insurrectionists who mobbed the Capitol. We've seen the divisive language from the Republicans. I've never seen that from Kamala Harris or President Biden. I think that's a difference in the two. Now, we all know the power of words after January 6th, after the Buffalo shooting, and many incidents that the right-wing manifestos left behind have detailed what's been motivating people to do what they do.
Chris, I'd love to get you to weigh in here. Obviously, in the last few years, we've had these horrific instances of assassination attempts. Obviously, on Steve Scalise, not one, not two, against Donald Trump. We've had, the threats of bombs and mysterious powdery substances wind up in the mailbox of Democrats, Republicans, members of the media. Like, Chris, how do you view this? And I wonder, given your years on Capitol Hill, Chris, and your connections and how deeply rooted you are to life in Washington, D.C., how do you assess the level of our heated political rhetoric right now? And are we able to reverse this? Are we able to turn this around at any point? Or is the toothpaste out of the tube, so to speak?
You bet, JD. It's a pleasure to be with you, gentlemen. And Antjuan, it's great to see you. No, I think Antjuan's right in terms of there needs to be a prohibition on political violence and accepting any level of animosity and damage that's done with those types of acts across the board. And I think that leaders, national leaders, state leaders, et cetera, really people in general need to assert those values by showing respect, by focusing on messages and not attacking people. So that's absolutely true. And we do live in a heated political atmosphere. And so, in my experience, both parties and many figures within it at the national level, certainly many members of Congress have made many incendiary comments going back now for the last several years. We've had candidates talking about giving rioters space to move and destroy. We've had riots in city municipalities. On January 6th, we had a series of criminals, in my view, that went and broke laws and should be absolutely swiftly punished. And I think that the real way we move forward with this is having a principle we don't detract from. In other words, when someone goes and commits a crime, whether it is a Bernie Sanders volunteer that goes and shoots members of Congress at a field game, or it's a Republican constituent, we do away with trying to score points on people's pain, and we actually hold a standard. So I think we have to just kind of hold that standard, and that's my view of the political violence question. In terms of where we go from here, I mean, again, I think we have to focus on the policies. We have to focus on the policy prescriptions, and I don't think it's specific to the former president. I think that both sides have an opportunity to have a little bit more of a eloquent dialect on issues.
Chris,
Well, yeah, Antjuan, please go ahead.
Chris, I would just ask you respectfully. I can't point to, and I'm deep in Democratic politics, I can't point to a post on social media, whether it's X, Facebook, Instagram, or others, by the leaders of our party that speaks to or will motivate folks to move in that direction. When you have posts like, I hate Taylor Swift, or the silent message to the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, all the things that come along with Trumpism and Donald Trump, we know those things are motivating for some people. We've seen the focus groups on national television where they said they felt like Trump was speaking to them to come to Capitol Hill on January 6th. We've seen that. And so I would just say, before we say it's both sides, let's just have real accountability and say, look, I think the leaders of my party have to be careful about the words they choose. For an example, on the debate stage, small town Ohio, Springfield, Donald Trump repeats a narrative that's not true, that Black Haitian immigrants were eating dogs and cats from the locals and taking geese from the pond. Now this little small town in Ohio have people who can't leave their homes, bomb threats to schools and hospitals, pretty much town shut down because of words and the danger that come along with those words from leaders in the Republican Party.
Chris, it was directly to you. Your thoughts, do you view this as like one issue where you're like, hey, maybe there's a little bit of one party bears more unique responsibility? I want Chris to answer before I weigh in here. Chris,
Sure,
what do you
sure.
think?
No, and before I answer that, the topic of assassination attempts is a whole separate security question. And in terms of being former military police and the Secret Service, that's a standalone issue that needs to be rectified for the safety of all candidates. In the context of this political discussion, I'm not going to defend bad behavior or irresponsible statements by anybody. On January 6th, I think that national leaders have more of a responsibility to communicate to people about their actions, et cetera. And I think that there were mixed messages from some conservative leaders. Now, what the campaign and what Republicans will show is that they requested certain levels of security, that there were additional precautions that were sort of thrown by the wayside by all folks that led to this sort of environment and this sort of out of control behavior. But I do agree that incendiary comments, and we live in this age now too, where you could take one report. For example, the story that Antjuan's referencing, and that was a subject of a portion of a debate, to my knowledge, is an unsubstantiated report. Essentially, this could not be substantiated. You could have one person commit an atrocity or do something, and then someone sort of seizes on that to sort of blow it out of proportion. And unfortunately, that's really what the entire political apparatus and what campaign politics is all about. We know that psychologically, negative sells. Look, you go back to elections with Democrats, and they're soft on crime, weekend prison passes, crime, and the next thing you know, a candidate's completely wiped out because it really resonates with people. So I understand candidates are gonna attack each other, and I don't know that it's useful to kind of get into the this person is worse. I think both parties have been negative in many statements, and again, Donald Trump, former President Trump, is a unique populist figure in politics that he's always been the same. He's always been the consistent. So he engages in attack politics. It's part of his style, and a lot of people don't like it. I don't necessarily, and I agree that we need to be mindful of the things we say, but his position would also be that he's been in public life. He's constantly attacked. He's in danger. He's being sued, that the government's been leveraged against him. And so he has a very combative formula. So again, I think going forward, we have to look at the policies. We have to look at who's actually going to keep us safe. And when we have a candidate that's running for president that's received 0 Democrat primary votes, and they're in government, putting a whole wish list of all the things they're going to do once they're in charge when they're at the highest level of government now, I think that's a challenge, and that's where we're at right now with the electorate, is trying to articulate these policy prescriptions over the next 2 months until Election Day.
All right, before we wind down to time on this segment, and there's a lot to be said, to the point of political discourse, this was the posted and then deleted tweet from the man who arguably has the most important megaphone on the most important platform for social media, Elon Musk. I personally miss the old Twitter. I get it. I'm like that old legacy blue checkmark crowd that's like yelling at clouds now that Elon Musk bought it. But this is objectively an insane tweet, right? And I know he's trying to joke around because Elon Musk, obviously, if you can't see it there, he says, and no one's even trying to assassinate Biden/Kamala with the ponder emoji. Antjuan, back over to you. I guess let's combine this conversation with the role of social media, the power and platform that Twitter, now X, has, and the fact that if you scroll through the @Elon Musk Twitter account, it is just repeatedly hammering one side of politics. He might argue, well, the old Twitter was more liberal before that, and they just did it behind the scenes. I'm just being outward with my endorsement. But Antjuan, your thought there on that tweet and the role of social media and things like that, that obviously we are going to talk about when someone like Elon Musk says something like that.
It's dangerous. It's radical. It's out of control. It should not be tolerated. And leaders of both parties should not be afraid to call out the obvious. Can you imagine the impact, the emotional impact that tweet or post on X is going to have on people who just do not like Kamala Harris and may be influenced by leaders with power like Elon Musk? Can you imagine the emotional impact it's going to have on candidates like Vice President Harris, Governor Walz, or those affiliated? Now they have to look even more over their shoulder because someone posted a tweet like that. And it's not just the post that was deleted. It was the penetration of the post, other people retweeting it, people commenting on it, people building on that tweet with even more extreme language that is a threat to all officials, not just the vice president. It's scary. And when we talk about the role of social media and this 24-hour news cycle, it can be used for good, but it certainly can be used to divide our country, the Constitution, the Congress, and our community. The biggest lies of misinformation, disinformation, down south we call it lies, happens on social media. You have bad actors, Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, opposite parties, i.e. Republicans for us, who are purposely targeting folks on social media with misinformation with the intent of influencing policy and the election results. It's dangerous. That's why AI should be regulated. Social media should be accountable, and we should not be spreading misinformation purposely online. And we need to hold our leaders accountable for their tweets and their words.
Chris, your thoughts here on the role that people like Elon Musk have on putting their finger on the scale one way or the other for this election, not only in terms of public endorsements, which is fine, but then I think what we could reasonably agree are not the type of posts anyone should be making, let alone the man who owns the platform. Your thoughts, Chris?
Sure, and you know, we look at leaders, we look at platforms, and we look at levels of standards. Certainly, any private citizen could issue any opinion they want, but we would assert that someone with a platform like that should be more mindful of how things are taken. But let's look at this in a broader context, right? So, social media has brought the advantage of information for people and rapid access to information. Same thing with technology generally, and yet with that has also come an influx of a lot of negative energy. And to echo what Antjuan had said about social media, I'll go a step further. Social media is in some regards, a very unhinged, very toxic place. I mean, any of us that are public have any sort of, I think for a legal terminology, Antjuan and I would probably be considered limited purpose public figures. We potentially could be just considered public figures at this point. We're appearing on various national television and we're talking about issues. But the standard, for example, on the civil side for like defamation against a person would be higher for someone in that space. But anyone that's been on television, if you read the comments, there is so many unhinged things, violence. And what's interesting, and this is not a disagreement with Antjuan on this. I mean, I do think we're looking at like this is only this isolated thing of the Republicans and then these world powers, as if folks on the left don't do this stuff constantly. I mean, Kathy Griffin was complaining about, showing a severed head of Donald Trump and then paying for it with her career. And then now she's not got such a big mouth. Now she's crying with the tissues because her career is over because what she did backfired. But there is, especially international shows you go on. I mean, I've had people calling for, violence against American veterans. It never gets taken down, right? So the left has had a way of getting through and having so much heinous stuff. And this is kind of humorous now. Every single post I've reported on, for example, say Facebook for really unhinged, really negative stuff, not one has ever been taken down. And I had my account suspended for essentially saying that if somebody attacked the Capitol, this is actually a liberal position if you look at it, if you look at the politics. I said, look, if you're storming the Capitol violently and you're running in there aggressively, I think you should be eligible to face deadly force with the officers. And it interpreted that as I was supporting violence, when actually I was supporting a policy position on a certain level of force law. So I guess where I'm going with that is, there does need to be a certain level of responsibility with these actors, but we have to look across the board. I do think social media should be more regulated, and it should be more of a debate. Vice President Harris was talking about this. There needs to be more regulation. All good and well, but is it going to be a uniform principle standard, or is it going to be just an isolated win points type of regulatory approach?
And look,
Absolutely. Antjuan, I got about 10 seconds if you don't mind, but I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be clear. I'm not saying social media is bad, and I don't think Chris is either. But I'm saying that we have to be careful about the content we use and the posts we use, because social media is a powerful force where millions of people are connecting around the world. And that's where most people our age, I'm 39, get their real-time news and information. But we just have to be careful about how our leaders address the public, elected or not, on these platforms.
Well, I was about to say, I oftentimes do think social media is bad, but I'm going to couch that comment to thank our social media viewers, in particular, over 100 who are watching right now on X. I don't know. I go back and forth. I'm like, this is either really great. I mean, I got days where I'm like, the internet is undefeated. I love everything about it. I love the memes. I love the commentary. We're all getting smarter together as voters. And I got some days where I read something and I say, God, the internet was a mistake. All right, folks, thank you all so much for tuning in. Right now, there at the bottom of your screen, you will see that QR code. Is it bottom right for them? Yes, bottom right. There it is now on the right side of your screen. Do you want to see Chris and Antjuan in the last segment of the show talk about which party is better positioned to deal with the looming China threat or to deal with the voter? Wow, or with the border, rather. Wow, 50-50 split. Look at this. We got a lot of enthusiasts on both sides of this debate. Time for the second topic, Taylor? How we looking? Yeah. We're cooking. All right, second topic now. This is Donald Trump's push into crypto and Democrats' attempts to try and win back this voter base. I actually don't know how large this voter base is. I'm going to ask both of you in a second. Some people call it the bro vote. I've also called it the Zin vote because there's just this emerging demographic of mostly men, and I don't know how many there are. I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania. They're going to decide the election here. But as we're having this conversation, we do have the price of Bitcoin up 42% year to date. Grayscale says that crypto has solidified its place in America's financial future, will be a key player in the 2024 presidential election. As we talk about the demographics that are crypto enthusiasts, we also talk about younger male, oftentimes perhaps somewhat disaffected voters, type of people who don't feel as if they want to engage with the partisan politics on this issue. And while a lot of people may think, well, these are largely Trump supporters, don't tell that to Tim Walz, Minnesota governor out there on the campaign trail, wants to be the next vice president. Here's a clip that he and his campaign released just a few days ago on social media. Take a look.
This guy was undecided, so was this guy, and they're both coming out for you.
I think I'm decided now.
Just matters. So I took him to the debate watch party, and that just flipped like that.
Yeah,
I mean, they were apathetic, and that's
It's not about agreeing on every single issue. It's about that core belief. And I said, this whole idea that you can't agree that the election was fair, this whole idea that people should have personal freedoms, which is kind of like the politics are turning over. Yeah, nice meeting you all. Yeah, really grateful you take the time again. Yeah, thanks. Go get them. Talk to your friends. Some of them are just going to say, look, I'm not that into politics. The answer to that is too damn bad. Politics is into you. So get engaged, go vote. Thank you so much.
Too damn bad. Politics are into you. I do like that line. If a Democrat or a Republican said, I'd say I just like that line. And then speaking, I guess, to a similar demographic, we had Donald Trump purchasing a burger here in New York City using Bitcoin. You'll notice the former president's hands. I don't really know if this is his phone or his MetaMask wallet, but clearly making a play for this base of voters. And we are hearing more about cryptocurrency policy from both the Harris and the Trump campaigns. Chris, over to you. Talk to me about your thoughts on this demographic right now and how the play is going specifically from the Trump campaign and the Republican side to speak to them. And I don't know, are there single issue crypto voters, you think?
Sure. I mean, look, any sort of activation of unregistered independent voters is really the name of the game. I mean, political parties are going to have their constituencies, but those independent votes decide elections, and they, in American politics, they obviously decide them in these swing states. So mobilizing people in this category is important, and I think they're smart to do it. One thing about Donald Trump that he seemed to understand throughout time, and I think that anyone that would just study him in a very neutral way would agree to this, that he's understood the power of optics and media and branding from the beginning. I mean, I think most folks associate him with the Celebrity Apprentice, and he's there, and it's almost kind of like you're scratching your head. You're like, I don't know if I like this guy. He's kind of bombastic, but then you find yourself intrigued when he's firing people in the boardroom. But the point is that you're sort of enamored by this sort of this aura. And I think that the strategy here with the Bitcoin, we talk about this bro vote, et cetera, is if you want to be, president of the United States, you do need to really kind of be likable and be out there and have these different people you can relate to, whether that's with President Trump and the UFC community and the business community, and also traditional, more sort of Democrat core constituencies around firefighters and law enforcement that have sort of been a little put off by some of the more progressive wings of the Democrat Party. Certainly there's different constituencies and philosophies within the Democrat Party, but I think going after those people is creative. You have to. Obviously, younger voters, really everyone. I mean, you're competing for veterans, you're competing for working class voters, and I think that's where the game is off. I think that statement, JD, that Walz made is a great one. I've thought about that for years. People say, well, I'm not really into politics. And it's like, well, politics cares about all the things you can do. So how fast you can drive, how many taxes you pay, how late you can stay up to a certain extent. I actually have always wondered why people wouldn't be interested in it in at least the basic sense. I mean, it's, and again, we live in a free country where people are happy enough where most Americans really don't know who their legislative, local state people are, or some of these things, but they do tend to follow these high-level races and vote for president. So I think getting these folks involved is good, speaking to new issues, and just, again, for these candidates, just being visible and being able to speak to new issues. So I think it's creative, and I think both candidates will compete for these sort of newer constituencies and to look up to date on what's happening in these spaces, so they seem to be oriented with the things that are happening in the nation.
Politics is not a spectator sport. I mean, I still have family members and dear friends, despite my years in the space, who are like, I don't vote, blah, 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 and I'm always trying to actively encourage people. Just remember the long history and the historically disenfranchised groups who've quite literally spilled their blood just for the thing that so many people take for granted. Also, if you don't vote, a little bit of a tangent here, but if why would you let everyone else pick who your bosses are, in theory, in the democracy, right? We all get a say, but you're like, I'm going to sit this one out, and then roads, taxes, all these crypto policy, whatever it is. I'm going to let someone else decide who I want to put in charge. Antjuan, over to you. Your thoughts on this demographic and what you've seen from Democrats so far on things like tech policy. There's been a lot of frustration with the Biden White House, the Biden SEC, trying to not quite be able to define what's a security and what is a commodity. Your thoughts, Antjuan, as you watch this conversation take shape less than 50 days from the election day. Think I'm short Antjuan's volume for a second. Antjuan, you got me? I think I just lost Antjuan's volume. Okay, we're going to work to get that back up. While we get that, we're going to toss to a quick shot. We'll have Antjuan fix his bet. We got a quick shot here. This is a conversation I had last week with Democratic California Congressman Ro Khanna exactly about I think we got Antjuan back. Let me play this, Antjuan. I'll go to you right after it. I asked Ro Khanna this exact question. How can Democrats better compete for this base? This comes from our friends over at Public. Let's take a listen. Did the Biden administration at times over-regulate crypto? And what can Democrats do more to earn the support of anyone who may be a single-issue voter?
Well, we need to embrace things like Fit 21, which is a bipartisan bill in the House that passed, and I support it, and that would provide regulatory clarity, saying that Bitcoin and crypto are important tools of financial innovation. Here's what the SEC should regulate. Here's what the CFTC should regulate. Yes, we want to protect ordinary consumers from being taken advantage on in investments, but Bitcoin and crypto is a source of storing value, and it's a source of making payments, and Ethereum is a source of web development. So we want to have that industry here, and there are things we can do like supporting Fit 21 that would signal that to the community. That bill, by the way, called Fit 21, he's referencing, it's known as the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Bill. We need to pass a congressional bill that makes the names of bills much shorter. Antjuan, I think we got your audio back here, my man. Your thoughts either on what Congressman Khanna had to say or what we were chatting about just before? Unfortunately, I think I'm still missing Antjuan. I thought I heard him there for a second before we went to the side. Let me kick it over to Chris. Oh, there we go. I got you. Antjuan, go ahead.
Sorry. In a democracy itself is not a guarantee. So every 2 to 4 years, you have to express themselves at the ballot. You do that vote. When we get to the place winners versus losers, we have to remember losers do not legislate. And you cannot govern if you do not win. And so when it comes to policies like crypto and others, the winners are the ones who get to decide whether policies are implemented to protect or expand or eliminate things
for sure. Antjuan, I don't mean to interrupt. I'm gonna cut you off for 1 second because your audio is still a little bit off. I do apologize. I don't mean to be rude and cut off your response. Let's try and get that situated. Let me kick it over to Chris. Your thought there on a bit of bipartisanship here to try and go after this vote. Democrats are at least trying. Some of them are. Chris, your thoughts?
No, absolutely. And I think they have to compete for that. And it's just, again, it's one of these things. I know we've talked a little bit about messaging and responsibility. And I think that's important. And I wanted to make this remark in the context of this discussion as well, that I know Tim Walz. I worked with him for many years on Capitol Hill, and I found him to be very affable and a very hardworking member of Congress. He served on the Veterans Committee. We know he spent 24 years in the National Guard, and I found him to be very effective on veterans issues. Now, all that being said, this sort of stolen valor conversation that just got really swept under the rug, it's really more kind of an easily correctable sort of misunderstanding that was created by him. He didn't deploy to Afghanistan. He didn't serve in Operation Enduring Freedom. When we said on C-SPAN, I deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, he didn't. He went to the Balkans. And it's frustrating for me to have that story of sort of swept aside where a lot of Democrat primary voters, because to be fair, like Antjuan made a fair point earlier, it's like, well, we've got Republican leaders out here talking about, incendiary things and making disparaging tweets about people. But with the Democrat side, it's like we have someone that's saying, I deployed to Operation Enduring Freedom. It's like sitting on the bench during an NBA playoff and saying, well, actually, I was in the playoffs and I was in the championship series. No, you weren't. So again, I think it comes to standards, and this is where I think being out there and doing more interviews and having more transparency, some of these things could be sorted through. But certainly we need to hold leaders to a standard. And I think that they have to compete for these newer constituencies, because I'm telling you, you don't want to lose on election day by a small margin. You'd rather lose by a larger margin than say, tens of thousands of votes in some of these swing states. So I hope that sort of gears in on some of those points you're referring to, JD.
Yeah, and what was it there in 2016? It was 77,000 some odd votes total between Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania that determined the difference between Clinton and Trump. A smaller capacity crowd than the Big House in Ann Arbor, where University of Michigan football. That's who gave Trump the presidency in those 3 key swing states. Now, God, that's already 8 years ago. Where did that time go? Antjuan, let's get you back in here. See how we're doing. Your thoughts there on everything Chris had to say.
I think the crypto
a lot of really fair points.
Community is a constituency that's a must, not a plus, because every vote matters, and we've seen the power of one vote. Look back at the election of 1877. Because of one vote, Reconstruction ended. Jim Crow was ushered in, lasted 95 years in this country. Consequential impact on communities that look like mine. So because elections are about coalitions and constituencies, a game of addition and multiplication, not subtraction or division, every constituency matters, including the crypto constituency.
All right, absolutely. It's a really fair point here. It's just about time here to move on. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go ahead and move on here now from the end. We got the Conasat in. Before we go on, as a reminder to all of our viewers watching home, you get that beautiful QR code. I got to be honest, guys. I don't really know how QR technology works. I mean, I get they're all unique. It's very cool. Very flashy. I don't love sitting there in a restaurant, though, and scanning, but it is cool for our purposes here. Do you want to see these 2 gentlemen here on your screen chat about the looming China threat or dealing with the U.S.-Mexico border? Vote now here. What do we want to do now, Taylor? Ad read time, folks. This is, if you haven't noticed, our premiere episode of Common Threads with JD Durkin. We are doing this every week here live from beautiful Brooklyn, New York. And speaking of wonderful QR technology, please give us your money. That's what this is for. We don't have sponsors just yet. We have an incredible team. Taylor's handing me a beer. Hi, neighbor. Have a Gansett. Like Narragansett for the fine folks at Narragansett who might be watching the broadcast and saying, God, I would love to give those knuckleheads my money to sponsor our product. We could do it for as little as $200. Is that what we said? We'll do your read. We'll sponsor your product as long as it's appropriate and it's cool. So, yeah, listen, I'm just going to be very direct, all right? Please give us your money. Every little bit helps. You want me to sit here in a fancy suit jacket next week and give you a nice little read? Please do. Scan the QR code to advertise with the greatest show on streaming that's called Common Threads, without a doubt, as woos go out through the audience. Okay, time now before we bring in Chris and Antjuan for a little pole dancing. Yeah, take my money. Thank you. This is my absolutely favorite segment that we do. In pole dancing, we take a look at some of the latest top numbers in polling to give you a sense on what voters are thinking. Obligatory disclaimer, polls are not predictions, polls are snapshots. And they also give us in the media something to talk about and help frame the conversation to give you a sense on where voters think. Let's start in the great state of Texas, where Ted Cruz is, yet again, locked in a race for his re-election bid. We go through this every 6 years. It was Beto O'Rourke several years ago trying to do the full county tour of Texas, trying to take the fight to the Republican incumbent Ted Cruz. They're still holding his narrow lead, kind of narrowish, I guess, over Colin Allred, longtime House Democrat there. Cruz still very much viewed as the favorite in this race, but Democrats view the Senate race in Texas as maybe a rare opportunity to flip an incumbent GOP-held seat. The state has not gone blue in a Senate election since 1988. The Texas Republican has raised just about $60 million. Contrast that with Allred's $38 million. That according to data from the FEC. Up next in our fan favorite pole dancing segment, this is either the greatest segment or it's like we're one and done. Like we're never going to do this again. I think it's the first one though. Harris versus Trump on the economy. And we're going to bring Chris and Antjuan after this. I have spent way too much time of my life the last week thinking about this because particularly among voters who watch the debate, they say Kamala Harris is who we best trust for stewardship of the U.S. economy over Donald Trump. And here's the real kicker, folks. In these polls, Biden never had that type of support relative to Donald Trump, which means that Vice President Kamala Harris right now, if you believe these polls, and they are snapshots from Financial Times and University of Michigan, she is successfully not just litigating the case against her opponent in the race, but she is managing to put a bit of daylight between herself and the unpopular economic policies of President Joe Biden. Antjuan, over to you. Specifically here on this poll of the economy, does this surprise you, Antjuan, that you're actually seeing Vice President Kamala Harris? She's got the big mo. She's got the momentum here in terms of how voters feel about the direction of the economy.
Well, the Financial Times had a polling article that came out a few weeks ago that says that the American people trust Kamala Harris more than Donald Trump on the economy. And I think that's partly because we've seen her ability to co-lead with President Biden and rebuilding the American economy after a once-in-a-century global pandemic where the United States landed softer than any other nation in the history of the world. And even the news today with the stock market roaring at its highest levels in the history of this country, it's a sign of the macro. Now her campaign is focused on the micro, housing, child care, child tax credit, etc. And that's a deep contrast compared to Donald Trump's non-economic plan. And I think the people are responding, and I call that Kamala-mentum.
Kamala-mentum. I don't know if you've used that before. I'm going to pretend this is the first time you've used it. I very much like it. Let me obviously state the obvious here, which is the stock market is not the economy. There is a correlation. There's lots of reasons that the stock market goes up, and there's lots of reasons the stock market goes down. Obviously, we had Fed interest rate cuts for the first time in more than 4 years yesterday after interest rates had been at generational highs. Chris, over to you. Stewardship of the economy. Are you surprised to kind of see, at least in the mind of voters, they're saying, hey, Vice President Harris, she's the one, at least on the debate stage, she litigated the case better, ironically, to even bring prices down. Voters say it's Harris over Trump, even if she's part of the Biden administration that coincided with 2022's spike in inflation. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Sure, it's a great question. It's a very interesting sort of statistic to look at in this context. And here's the thing here. So you look at these polls, people, and this is before the technology age and the technology revolution here with iPhones and all these, the attention span of a voter is short. And so you ask someone something at noon and you ask them again at 5 p.m., their answer may change. The impression that they've had, I think when you look at, for example, JFK and Nixon, right? We had JFK just looking a little more fresh in a debate and being tan. And then I think, Vice President Harris is very fresh. I think we're way past time for having a woman president. I think there's so much there, that I think there's some appeal there. But now, if we really want to look down at fact and we really want to analyze things like economics, we sort of brushed by the whole philosophical discussion too. I mean, there's the idea that the president of the United States or that the leader of the federal government somehow, actively dictates the economy. I mean, it's about business, it's about entrepreneurism, it's about small business and real Americans. And there's an argument there that when the government spending is through the roof and inflation, it goes up, things are actually hurt. So now we get into analytics and we get into what types of jobs, what about these median salaries, and how are we calculating part-time work? So again, I don't believe that the voters that are polled in these polls have a full grasp of all of these economic principles. And polls are snapshots in time. They're questions. So when you look at voter sophistication versus Democrat versus Republican voter sophistication, the orientation of those polls and the way they ask questions is imperative, because I would disagree that the Democrats have a stronger stewardship over the economy, and certainly some of these issues are revolving around safety and border security. If the federal government can't do its most basic task, which is protecting the Capitol and protecting its people, and we have border insecurity and influx of people we can't account for, that's not success, and that affects the economy as well. So I think the polls are a little bit there needs to be a control for lack of voter sophistication and the way in which those polls are the opinions are solicited.
To be fair, I think a lot of people I work with on Wall Street couldn't explain to you the nuances of the U.S. economy. We just had a comment there on ticker symbol DJT, which of course is down a lot since Trump Media went public via SPAC early this year, closing the day at $14 and change. Antjuan, real quick before we get to our last topic, I saw you wanted to pop in.
Yeah, I want to just say, Chris, I agree with you about this roller coaster ride that America is going to be taking on between now and November 5th. Where we disagree is on the fact. The fact is inflation is down to its lowest point since February 2021. That came out just last week. And I would suspect you will probably have a different response if the polling indicate that the economy would be better under former President Trump. And the polling said something a little different about the economic bill of health and who can handle it better. And then just another quick fact, historically, the economy has always done better when a Democrat is in the White House. That's non-debatable. We've seen that historically.
Well, I unfortunately can't get into that. The market historically does tend to slightly outperform under Democratic administrations. You also had that wild claim at the DNC, which is true on a note of technicality from Bill Clinton with regards to job growth under Democrats versus Republicans. But of course, there's also a much more nuanced truth to that, which is different presidents have overseen bull market, bear market cycles, recessions, all these things outside of a president's control. It really impacts inflation, impacts the state of pricing, monetary policy, etc. Since we're almost wrapped up, and I want to get you guys out of here because you've been more than generous with your time. Time now for the Choose Your Own Adventure, the third story. What are we dealing with for the day? Wow, look at this. All these votes in, dealing with the border. Antjuan, I'm going to kick things over to you. Obviously, we understand the border czar accusation that that Republicans want to make and say Vice President Harris really did not take very many, if any, trips down to the border. She was tasked with this. Now it's a little too late. Antjuan, as your positioned as a Democratic strategist the way that you are, what gives you confidence that it's actually Democrats who are better equipped and in a better position to handle this issue?
She was not the border czar. She was put in charge of finding the root cause of migration for 3 countries at that part of the region of the world, and she was successful because the number of migration crossings or the crossings were down to its lowest point after she was given that responsibility. And then on immigration as a whole, our immigration issues were not created because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Leave it to Donald Trump. We're going to build a wall. Mexico is going to pay for it. All the immigration issue goes away. But what we can say is because of the executive order that came from the Biden-Harris administration, illegal crossings continue to come down to the lowest point even when Trump left office. And what she has said, she will sign the bipartisan comprehensive legislation on day one that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance killed that will give us a safe, secure, and humane border, as well as give us the resources we need to continue to bring those numbers down.
I think we have a graphic with regards to border crossings to Antjuan's points with regards to some of the, obviously there's factors of seasonality. This is a 52-week look back for people who can't see the months at the bottom of the screen. Chris, over to you. I sit there and again, like a lot of other issues, I kind of go back and forth and say, you know what? Maybe the bill wasn't perfect, but damn, we had an immigration bill. Republicans wrote it. James Lankford took the lead. McConnell supported it. Right? Is it perfect? Does either side get exactly what they want? No. But Donald Trump's there on the sidelines in Mar-a-Lago and tells his own party to go scuttle it and not make it a reality because he wants to turn this into a political election issue. But at the same time, I understand that a lot of this crisis has been to the forefront since Joe Biden took the oath of office. Your thoughts, Chris?
So an uncomfortable truth that we just have to acknowledge is that both political parties have benefited from illegal immigration, and they know it. Republicans have benefited from cheap foreign labor over time, and Democrats have focused on voter blocks and other sort of themes when it comes to that. And so, and look, in terms of the statistics, there's also disputes about the number of borders and the way that we're border crossings and the way that we're tabulating that. I've heard a variety of different statistical analysis around that, but to the extent that we're going to talk about claims, I think Antjuan had made 2 claims, but I didn't hear one source. I think he may have mentioned Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, but again, these are snapshots in time. I think we'd have to look at the evidence. But look, both political parties continue to market these things. It's always about politics. It's not just about the president down at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, members of Congress, they campaign. If we really want to do away with this, it's campaign finance reform. When you have term limits, when you have a limitation on the economic fundraising that you're doing, you're left with actually doing the job that you're meant to do. And for most average Americans, and I think this is something where working class voters in these swing states where President Trump and his campaign have an opportunity to bring these folks out. Most people don't wake up and get rich in the government. I mean, there are people, I could go on for 3 hours of the crazy federal activities that are going on and millions of dollars wasted at places like the VA, which treats our veterans with $800 million in housing. They can't freaking house one veteran, and yet they're spending $800 million wasting that money. And you have people in these bureaucratic positions, GS level people, earning $200,000 a year to produce nothing. So again, when we talk about the context of jobs and economy, et cetera, it's also, you have to look at government versus sector,
Chris,
et cetera.
Yep. Sorry, don't want to leave it there. Are we going to get to this last question here? We want to let them go. All right, real quick before we let go, Antjuan, I know you got a hard out here. In 2016, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were both asked to say something nice about the other person at their final debate. Antjuan, I would like you to give us some indication. If Donald Trump wins this election, is there anything on common ground that you could see yourself agreeing with Republicans on?
I can see myself agreeing with Republicans on the fact that we have work to do on all the issues that Democrats and Republicans are talking about, and we have to find higher ground where we cannot find common ground.
Chris, how about you? If it's Harris in a Democratic sweep, what does that mean? There's got to be some compromise here in good faith, right?
I'd like to see the government work. Americans go to work every day and they work. The government actually work. And what I mean by that is you're not waking up and reading the press releases about Republicans or Democrats attaching a voter amendment to an otherwise spending bill where we're hoping to get the Farm Bill, the National Defense Authorization Act, and a few annual bills passed by the end of the year. Because remember, if we don't have an annual bill, we can't have any community funded projects either. And it's all because of politics. We have to wait and see what the election does. Most Americans would like their government to work just as hard as they do. So I would say they need to get into government, and we need to work with these people and move forward and lead by example and live lives guided by principles and not political themes and self-interest.
Sure. Well, we got a Farm Bill and an NDAA reference onto the show, which means it's officially a party for us congressional nerds. I am absolutely thrilled with both of you for being here. It was a fantastic conversation. Chris, Neiweem, Antjuan, Seawright, my special thanks to both of you. All of our millions of viewers at home, please go off. Antjuan's like, that's it. It's party time. Please go follow these guys on social media. My special thanks to both of you guys. Thanks for being here.
You bet, JD. Great to be with you.
All right, now what? Now what do we do? Guys, listen, we were figuring this out on the fly. You may think, oh, this man's in a blue jacket. He knows what he's doing. Surprise, I don't. We're going to read a comment there on the border. On the bottom, if JD had to cross the border from USA into Canada, what did it say? What point in the border would he pick, and what time of year would he do it? I don't know what happens in the whole stretch between like the Pacific Ocean and Minnesota. I don't know what goes on in that entire region of southern Canada and northern United States. I can't really say I've ever been up there. I'd have to imagine statistically, if I had to go, that would be where I tried to make my jump. I'm not going to, please. I want to be clear because I know our friends at Homeland Security are watching this. And what time of year? I don't know. I'm not a big summer guy. I would just probably wait till it's a leisurely jaunt as the weather went down a little bit. If you've got comments, folks, please put them into the chat and let us know. We're going to feature them. I'm going to BS about them because that's what we're here to do because, they don't do this on cable news. Common threads after dark. Hey now, Nathan, that's for subscribers only, sir. We don't want to give away all the goods just yet here. But, maybe we will need to do something like that. Absolutely. I got to say, I really appreciate that conversation because you never know when you bring in two people with such politically opposed viewpoints, like things like this devolve a lot. And I think part of it's because we all watch so much traditional cable news political coverage, the talking heads, and they're designed to fight, and the media is designed to kind of go after conflict. And I get it, right? It's not entirely the media's fault, I don't think, as a member myself, in part and long time of mainstream media. It's because you, the viewer at home, you're much less likely to watch a segment or click on a link about the defense bill or the farm bill or something boring on policy, but you will watch the segment about Congressperson so-and-so who said something absolutely insane. So anyway, what is this one? Is Bitcoin going to the moon? Well, like we said earlier, Bitcoin has had a nice bounce. It's up about 42% year to date, currently pricing at 63,000. I'd like to hear from someone in the comments who's like, oh, I bought a bunch of Bitcoin 12 years ago, and I just sat on them. I gave them out as wedding gifts because they were meaningless at the time. And now I'm retired. I'm never going to work a day again in my life. But the Bitcoin conversation is actually really important. I think it is. And it's interesting to watch Trump and Harris, not just on Bitcoin crypto policy, but just like dueling economic populism. A lot of it is really strange. Like Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, not giving a ton of details on things she wants to do for the child tax credit or to help small businesses. Like, yes, she floats the numbers, but it doesn't really seem in the mind of most economists that's realistic. And then the one that's really got me flabbergasted is former President Donald Trump coming out this week and saying we're going to cap credit card interest payments at 10%. I mean, that to me is so antithetical of Republican small government regulation, but we're making this play for economic populism, and these things are... shout out. These things are a little weird as they play off. Andrew Ford says, we will also watch cats falling off tables. Gotta be honest. Thank you for the comment. Thank you for watching, Andy. I don't know entirely what this means, but listen, we are looking for mascots for the show for sure. So if our logo, our mascot needs to be a cat that's falling off the table, I don't have to pretend like I fully understand it. What else we got? Rhetoric aside, aren't guns part of the issue? I also don't know exactly when all the comments came filtering through. But yes, of course. Oh, that was from the first topic. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, by the way. Dealmo03. We are pro callback on common threads. There's no doubt about it. Yes, guns are absolutely, you know, I always think about that old Supreme Court justice. He was Chief Justice. I think it was Berger. He famously said the Second Amendment is the most warped of anything from the original Bill of Rights. We have no more warped misinterpretation of anything in the original Constitution or the first 10 amendments than we do the Second Amendment, which of course clearly says a well-regulated militia, which is, I can't really imagine it meant then what we now interpret it to be now. But don't worry, we'll certainly have those debates, unfortunately, because they are really important ones here on the show in the coming weeks. Lee says, love the format. Congrats on the first show. Lee, like we said, it is the best show that we have done. And I do not do the show by myself. I got to shout out Taylor, Chris, Alexi, Dan, Danielle, the millions of viewers watching at home, because you all make it possible. And that was really exciting stuff. How else are we cooking up? Is it time to drink?
Might be time for a shot.
Might be time for a shot, he says. Am I allowed to drink this beer?
Absolutely.
All right. Narragansett, please sponsor our show. Please give us money. Yeah, as a reminder, we are looking for advertising partners first because we want to be able to keep this going. I saw this one early. Carly Craig said, yeah, I muted Elon on Monday. If you are a Twitter or an X user and you're at the point where you've muted Elon Musk, I understand it. Here's my quick thing on Elon Musk before we move on. I so deeply appreciate, I think more than most people, the depth of the business success that this man has had. And it's not just PayPal. Obviously, all these things are work by committee. I do think Tesla is a generationally important company. I am a huge space and rocketry fan, so it is tough to put into perspective how important a company like SpaceX is. I think NASA is having the moment it is right now with the Artemis missions and its research because of SpaceX. I think SpaceX is coming in and bailing out Boeing's ass for leaving the 2 astronauts on top of the ISS. All of these things are amazing that Elon Musk is largely responsible for. And at the same time, he tweets absolutely insane shit that I don't think he should. Oh, can I say that? Oh, I just did. Well, oh well. Bleep. And that's the frustrating part, right? So that's why I say, like, the truth is this messy version of the middle. I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, Elon Musk is a total jackass. He doesn't do anything right. I just genuinely don't think that's true. I think his companies are amazing. I just think he way overpaid for this platform. He is doing this fake BS public posture like he's saving political discourse in this country, and he's trying to justify spending way too much money on this thing, and in the doing so, he's really tweeting some rather unfortunate things. How's that? One's for one shot, or 1 minute left in the show?
1 minute left before we take a shot.
1 minute left in the show. Listen, my thanks to each and every one of you who took the time to tune in to the show tonight. This gives you a sense we're going to continue to tweak it. We're going to continue to make it what we're doing. One more time for the greatest graphic my team has made. Listen, this really is the pinnacle of my broadcast career. It's the pole dancing graphic that you just watched, because I've had an idea to do a segment called Pole Dancing for almost a decade, and finally, at long last, this amazing team got to make it happen. My special thanks once again to our great guest who kicked off the first episode of Common Threads, Chris Neiweem and Antjuan Seawright. Go follow them on social media. My big thanks to the team, Taylor, Chris, Alexi, Dan, Danielle, each and every one of you. We will see you again next week on the new episode of Common Threads.